Many regions of Africa have been severely affected by drought over the last few decades. The inhabitants flee to the south. The granaries are almost empty. The rains have failed, and even drought-resistant crops will not mature. Few tree species can survive. Hungry animals strip the remaining vegetation. Relentlessly, the desert advances. But there is another image of Africa, a green land where people, trees, and crops have lived in harmony for centuries. The trees providing leaves which fall in the rainy season, fertilizing the soil. An Africa covered with forests which contain the continent's most important form of energy, firewood. Wood is the world's most reliable and widely used renewable source of energy. Until recently, it was also the one most taken for granted. But firewood is becoming more and more difficult to obtain. The energy crisis faced daily by 1.5 billion of the world's people. In many parts of the Third World, women and children must spend a large part of their day in search of firewood. The never-ending tasks of foraging for wood and fetching water leave little time for more productive activities, such as food production and education. In some African countries, firewood accounts for 90% of all energy requirements. In times of drought, even more wood is harvested to provide an income for farmers whose crops have failed. Dealers in firewood must travel up to 100 kilometers from many cities to find supplies. Africa has the highest birth rate in the world. Its energy needs are continually increasing. The more difficult firewood is to obtain, the higher it's priced. Today, urban families must spend as much as a quarter of their income on firewood. Bakeries, breweries, and brickmaking also consume large amounts of wood, as does fish smoking and takeout restaurants, which are growing in popularity in Africa's cities. Wood, of course, is also important for construction, for making fences, furniture, houses, and boats. Unfortunately, the supply is not infinite. In many regions, consumption is outstripping production. The price paid for this overexploitation is high. The sun burns the earth, the wind blows, the desert advances. And when wood is no longer available, people cook with animal dung and crop residue, robbing the soil of needed nutrients. Fewer trees mean less water retained in the soil. With every tree that is cut, the danger of drought increases. But are there other options for energy supplies in Africa? Fossil fuels are too expensive for most people. And electricity is only available in the towns and cities. Perhaps someday, solar technology will provide the answer. But for the present, it is too expensive, and much of it has not moved beyond the experimental stage. Solar cookers once looked promising, but have not yet been adapted to African cooking habits. Many such experiments have been abandoned. Attempts to improve traditional stoves have been more successful. Better insulation, simple air controls, and more efficient cooking pots have all helped to reduce the consumption of wood. Today, such stoves are being installed in African homes and in institutions such as hospitals. Charcoal is another form of energy which is becoming very popular in the cities. It is lighter and less bulky, and therefore easier to transport. However, it takes 4 to 5 tons of wood to produce 1 ton of charcoal, a ratio that could be reduced if modern charcoal kilns were used. New designs in charcoal stoves are now available, such as the improved Jiko, a marriage of Asian and African technology. It saves up to 50% of the charcoal consumed by traditional charcoal stoves. However, such new technology takes time to be accepted. Rural families will continue to use the open fireplace for many years to come. It requires very little organization, labor, or expense, and it has the extra advantages of light and warmth, a place for social gatherings, even though 90% of the energy goes up in smoke. What then is the answer? How can the demand for firewood be met without doing irreparable damage to the land? In drought-stricken countries such as Niger, tree planting must be increased 100-fold, millions of trees before the end of the century. In the region just north of Zinder, in central Niger, the desert has invaded, leaving behind it nearly abandoned villages. But 100 kilometers to the south at Matamé, there's a very different story. In this region, over the past 10 years, the government of Niger has carried out a successful reforestation program which has pointed the Sahel in a new direction. Instead of establishing large government-owned plantations, the foresters have taken a very different approach, involving the villagers from the beginning. Before starting the project, they took the time to learn more about the ancient relationships between trees, crops, people, and their animals in this region. The forester, at one time simply a forest warden, has become a rural development worker, providing support and expertise. Villagers such as Ali Ibrahim have been trained to run small tree nurseries on their own farms. Each of these mini nurseries produces 3,000 to 5,000 seedlings per year. These operations reduce transportation costs and other expenses involved in maintaining large state-owned nurseries. Until recently, the people in this region felt that planting trees was the business of the government. The foresters have found, however, that when the villagers own and operate the nurseries, they also accept the responsibility for planting and caring for trees. The villagers were taught new techniques, such as the correct method of planting. They learned how to protect the young trees against animals. Exotic tree species such as the neem have adapted well to Africa over the years. Such trees can reach a respectable size in 4 to 5 years. Establishing village or family woodlots is not a clear-cut process. All kinds of factors come into play: ethnic affiliations, grazing rights, and complicated patterns of land ownership. But if villagers learn to cooperate in planting woodlots, they will also be drawn together to reap the benefits. The community becomes self-sufficient in wood for fuel and other uses. If species such as the neem are cut at the proper height, new shoots will grow in a short time. At Matame, the villagers were taught how to manage their valuable new resource, eliminating the weakest shoots so that others would grow straight and tall. The Village Woodlot project at Matame has become a model for several other activities being carried out by national and international agencies in Niger. Similar projects are underway in many other countries. The emphasis in most of these projects is on youth. Children are being taught the importance of trees in their school programs.
Banda wanda na ga muku tun da hari nake yana rage karfin iska. To banda turare akwai wanda ana ke baby mun san shi.
The work at Matame and elsewhere has helped to create a national movement as expressed in Niger's National Tree Day. Today, many African countries celebrate a similar national day that underlines the role of the tree in their future. This kind of event is important because it encourages people to maintain their efforts over the long term. If the desert is to be stopped, millions of trees must be planted before the end of the century. Trees which at the same time can provide one of the answers to Africa's energy crisis. These village and family woodlots are an important element in the future of Africa. Throughout the continent, the tree cutter must also become a tree planter.